Hi, my name is Jaden Leary. I'm a senior at St. Louis Park High School.
Hi, I'm Anissa Kahan. I'm also a senior at St. Louis Park High School.
And I'm Heidi Cosgrove. I'm one of the counselors here at the high school, particularly this year, the class of 2025.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Angel Food Donuts.
Sweet.
So you get first picks.
I
on
will
what you would
take
like.
the chocolate one.
Okay. You can,
No, I'll eat it later. No.
Okay. Thank you for joining us today. So what the purpose of this podcast is as I said, I got a bunch of questions from some of my junior and sophomore friends. I came up with questions of my own as well that are sort of curious going into their senior year, what they need to know about the college application process, college life generally speaking, and overall what they should expect when it comes to college their senior year. Ms. Cosgrove, what do you think are some of the most important factors when looking into colleges for an application, on how you rank what colleges you would like to go to or not?
Without a doubt, it has to be fit, in my opinion. I think there's always the component where students look at name recognition. They look at selectivity. And I think that's normal. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's just part of the whole process of starting. And ultimately, when they kind of look at all the different components, it's an investment that they're making, whether it's a certificate program, a 2-year program, a 4-year program. It's a significant amount of time. And you have to make sure it's the right fit of what you're looking for. And that could be location, that could be size of the school, that could be what it has to offer, what supports, and all those pieces. It's like a puzzle piece. All those pieces have to come into play.
When you talk about fit,
Yeah.
How does culture of a college play into that factor? How can kids get to know the culture of their college? Because I feel, for me personally, looking on it, I think that also played a major factor.
Absolutely.
As to why.
I think the colleges will always, first and foremost, promote their website of what the college environment and site is, which is great. With that said, they, I assume, have professional people making their websites, and it's going to look amazing and beautiful, and flowers planted, and students smiling when they're studying, and that one-on-one or small group work with professors, showing diversity. They all kind of look the same from that standpoint. Even the literature that comes out. The beautiful brochures or the little info posters, they kind of look all the same, in my opinion. Ultimately, it's great if students can get on campus and look around and see what it feels like. But that's also very difficult, especially if their hours are a plane ride away. That's hard to do. One of my favorite pieces of looking at that culture is social media, checking out social media sites, as well as like their student newspapers or publications or podcasts or whatever it might be, student run organizations, to see, what are the students saying, what's being said on campus. And that's where I think school newspapers, as you know, can be a huge voice of what's really happening within those 4 walls, if you will, to really get an idea of what culture and what the environment looks like.
The next question is, how can students make their personal statements stand out?
Ooh, this is a fun one for me. This is one where it just kind of became I don't know how it happened. It just kind of became a passion of mine, where I really like to look at essays and look at personal statements. And it's conversations I've had with students where I'll talk to them about they're sitting at the computer and they're ready to type, and it's when I was, kind of this once upon a time almost feeling, and they get stuck. And as I've talked with students, you all have been trained, if you will, to write academically, to think of that, opening 5-paragraph essay, supporting sentences, blah, 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 everything like that. And now these personal statements, you have to really talk about the heart. And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to open yourself up and to talk about that, because you've never really had to write formally like that. And so it's really hard to turn that switch, if you will. And so one thing I've said to students, I don't look at your application. This is where I've said to students, I like to play admissions counselor. Maybe that'll be my role in my next lifetime. I like to play admissions counselor. If I can't look at your application, if I can't look at your transcript, I don't see any of that except your personal statement. What do I learn about you? What is it about you that, as an admissions counselor, I would say, I want that person on my campus? And so really being able to kind of shut down the brain a little bit and open up the heart and kind of do that soul searching, deep dive of who you are is where that passion can really come out and make you 3-dimensional on a 2-dimensional sheet of paper or screen of what they're probably going to be looking at.
What should students be doing during their freshman, sophomore, maybe even junior years, but specifically those early years of high school to prepare for college applications?
Well, this is a personal one, even for me right now, because my daughter's a sophomore. And every now and then I'll put in little, well, what are you thinking about? And it's always like, oh, Mom, I don't know, and everything. And, and I know that, having done this for many, many years, that question can be very scary for students, because you're still starting that journey of high school, and to have to all of a sudden start thinking about after high school, it's very daunting, it's very scary, it's even scary as seniors right now. And so one of the things I think is for freshmen and sophomores is that is the time to continue building those amazing homework habits and then transition into studying. I know that a lot of times, and again, see it with my own daughter, where the idea of studying is just doing your homework. And there's this crossover that happens as you starting high school and getting deeper into high school, where studying is now studying your already done homework, reviewing your already done homework. And I think starting that process and really embracing it in freshman year and sophomore year, building those studying habits so that, you can continue with the grades that you're wanting to get, entering the courses you're wanting to enter, and so that you can build that transcript.
One thing I think about a lot is I feel like when I'm talking about me personally, I found my why very early on. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky in that regard. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about I'm probably going to write my college essay about this or that. Mm-hmm. And it's changed over the years. But I found a why. I'm sure Anissa had found her why early on, mm-hmm. knowing Anissa. What can kids try to do? Maybe it's not possible, but what can kids try to do to find that why early on in their high school career, find their passion, find their drive, find it so that mm-hmm. it's so easy to write your essays? I mean, you got reviewed a million times, of course, sure. But you have your idea because you know where you want to go. Yeah.
I think that being open to what's out there, being open to, sure, the school activities, the school environment, the clubs, everything like that, but also being open to looking at what's out in the community to get involved with, I think is so crucial. In 9th and 10th grade, the journey of exploration is, looking at TikTok and playing Block Blast or whatever that new game is, all those pieces, it's just you're losing opportunity to see what's out there. Now, I'm not saying stay off social media because that's just not possible. Yes, play Block Blast for whatever, but just being open and I hear this with some of the people I know from my daughter's group, where it's like, well, I just want to get used to freshman year. I don't really want to do too much. And it's like, but that's the time, put yourself out there. And if it's not time freshman year, then make sure it's time for sophomore year, because that's where that growth, and it doesn't have to be a school sanctioned event. It could be something out in the community that you could be doing. And I think that helps to kind of nurture and water that why.
How important are extracurricular activities in the college application process?
Great question. So I think what's important is longevity. Colleges are very quick to notice kind of this all of a sudden laundry list of activities, starting in spring of junior year or all of a sudden in, fall of senior year, where they're like, oh, well, look at all these activities all of a sudden. Colleges, they know. They've seen a gazillion applications. They know. And so really what they're looking for is that longevity and that commitment throughout the year or throughout the summer, or, not that it has to be an everyday thing or an every week thing, but just that longevity of it. And to show kind of that you're passionate about something. And that's what they're looking for. And again, it doesn't have to be a school sanctioned activity or club, because there's some people who aren't able to join clubs and activities. They're just not, for a variety of reasons. No shame or blame. It's just they're not. They got other things going on. And colleges recognize that. I think maybe 15 years ago, they probably didn't as much, but I think they're doing a much, much better job of truly looking at what they call the holistic individual.
What advice would you give to students at any level who are going into, after not really maybe finding their why, but are undecided about their major?
Mm-hmm. Oddly, I'm kind of maybe what might be called a little backwards in this. I would much rather have a student enter their post-secondary journey, again, whether that's certificate 2 year, 4 year, whatever that might be, with saying, I have no clue what the heck I want to do. Because I actually tend to worry more about students that say, I want to do this, period. And there's always going to be students that know that. I had a friend that knew that, back in my day when he was in 9th grade, and he's doing it now. So there's always students that will know that. But I do get a little nervous when students perhaps get a little too tunnel visioned, if you will, because then they potentially enter this new phase of life with blinders on, not perhaps able to see what else is out there. And so I would much rather have a student kind of feel like, yeah, I don't know, because then they're looking, So that's just, again, I might be backwards in that, but that's just how I think about it.
What are some common mistakes students make on college applications?
Some very quick spelling ones that I've seen is when a student puts that the country they live in is Hennepin, or the county they live in is USA. Those are some big ones, just kind of off, just right there. I think what I also hear from colleges is they can see they've done this a gazillion times, where the parent or guardian is doing the application for them. that can be, even though it's, an online application, there's just wording and phrases and how it's presented where it's like, interesting. So, I think one of the other mistakes students make, and I don't think it's a mistake, I think it's an oversight, kind of going back to any personal statements or activities, is it feels odd for students to, for lack of better words, want to brag about themselves, right? It's like, we're all kind of taught, well, just, kind of keep it down a little bit. Don't, brag about yourself. And it's like, come on, we got to go here. You gotta bring it. You gotta, this is about you, and you gotta toot that horn, so to speak. You gotta make it happen. So I think that's probably one of the mistakes I see, is just students being a little shy and not wanting to seem braggy, and it's like, it's not about that. It's like, you get to put your best foot forward, and there's no shame or blame in that. So that's probably one of the mistakes I see. The other one comes with essays, and I love to read essays. Again, I don't know where that came from, because as I've said to students, I did not do well on English 12. I don't edit very well, but I love to read them and give feedback. And I think that's where when I talk with students about their essay, I'm like, I need more heart. I need more soul. It's almost too academic, where I may be learning about something else or someone else and not them.
How should students approach letters of recommendation broadly? How should they know who to pick? How should they know, because I know some colleges are optional or have more nuanced approaches to them. How should they know whether they should send one in? Is it always send one in? How is that situation?
Yeah, so what's super important, super important, and this maybe goes back to what mistake do students make, is not checking the school's website for what that school needs in particular, because every school has admissions step-by-step directions on what is needed. So that, I see that as a mistake, where students don't look at that. And I look at the U of M, because I know the U of M doesn't need a transcript, and we get requests for transcripts. And it's like, I know you didn't look at the website, because I know the U of M doesn't even want a transcript. So I think making sure that you are reviewing each college's website to find out what it is that they need, first and foremost, because I think students kind of jump in going, I need a letter of recommendation. Do you know? Might you need a letter of recommendation? How do you know? Back to what you were saying, Jaden, of do you send one anyways? I'm always a believer in you can kind of one up what the college is asking for. So if the college is saying, sure, we'll take one, could you send two? Sure. If the college is saying, we want two, could you send three? Sure. You might have to send it directly to them or your recommender, because it might not fit in Naviance or Common Application or whatever, Parchment or whatever. But I'm a believer of, sure, you can one up, but don't send, if they say zero, don't send three. They mean zero, and then taking a look at who can write a letter. Again, kind of prior to COVID, I think it was very much about your junior year academic teachers, core academic teachers, and I think that's still the idea for sure. But I think colleges are now wanting information of who can talk the best about you, who can talk about you, who can talk about your hard work, who can talk about your character. And if it's not a core academic teacher, if they're not going to be able to really talk about that, yes, they're a core academic teacher, but what is that college learning about? So I've seen since COVID a lot more outside letters, rabbis, ministers, coaches, club coaches, employers. I've seen a lot more of that.
I've definitely seen that shift as well, because I haven't even when I really only picking one teacher, and I really only picked them because they knew me, not because they were my teacher. So yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
How does the financial aid process work, and what should students know about it?
So the financial aid process, that definitely is over my head. I can't even deal with my own finances at my house. Just being honest. But the financial aid process, this is where the FAFSA comes in. That stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which is now open. Knock on wood, there are not nearly as many issues as last year. But essentially the idea of that is for students and families to fill out essentially all their money information, taxes, things like that, or if they're undocumented and they're going to a school in Minnesota, filling out the DREAM Act information. And so essentially that is the way to get any federal grants, loans, scholarships, and then students will get information from the FAFSA saying, based on this information, we believe your out-of-pocket cost is this, this, and that. Which in my experience is always like, how am I coming up with that money? What? But then the colleges, because you list your colleges, also get that information. And colleges have their own pots of money, if you will, whether it's from donors, from alumni, whatever it might be. And so they can look at that FAFSA and say, okay, based on that and what pot of money we have, we can also give you this. And this college could say, we could give you that. And this college could say, we don't have any more, or we don't have anything. So you start to get these little financial aid packages to see, okay, this school can give me this school can give me that school can give me nothing, da-da-da-da-da. So you can start to see, narrowing that down of what your cost will be from the college. FAFSA does a really, really good job of having help sessions and live help chats, which the 12th grade counselor last year said that students really liked the live help chat from FAFSA because you want to go to the source, and that's FAFSA, to get support with that. And the college's financial aid offices are also super, super willing to help as well. Students get a little nervous about that because they're like, well, is that going to affect my admissions? Or, are they going to think I can't do this? And are they going to tell admission? All that. They get nervous. And I get that. Though they're not there to be like, what do you mean you need help? Well, we're going to tell admissions that you called and you need help. No. They don't do that.
How can, and I know this is far in between, I feel like this doesn't happen as much anymore, but how can students prepare for college interviews?
I haven't seen interviews being a huge component. I think the more selective colleges get, that's where they will often have regional interviews from that standpoint. But that's getting very, very selective with schools. I think preparing for interviews, I think less is more in the sense of, you don't want to seem, what's the word I'm looking for? Fake, right? You don't want to seem like, you want to show up authentic. And I think that's what they're looking for. We were just watching the Modern Family episode where Alex was doing an interview and she had the preparation, and the interviewer was like, another one so boring who does this and does that and, no personality and everything. And I think that authentic component just has to be key. And I think just being able to hold a face-to-face conversation is just a great way to practice, because the reality is how do we communicate? With our thumbs, right? Texting. We're very two-dimensional in our conversations. And I think being able to hold a three-dimensional face-to-face conversation of, tell me about yourself. What do you like? What are you interested in? Why are you looking at this particular college? I think to be able to be ready for that in a conversation is so key from that standpoint.
One of those two-dimensional aspects is SAT and ACT. how should students view standardized tests? I know, seeing it personally, a lot of schools are. I'm on the cutoff year where after this, a lot of schools are going back to requiring SAT or ACT scores. How should students approach SAT, ACT? Should they stress about them? Should they view them as part of a holistic process? How?
Well, I think students are going to stress about them no matter what. So I can say don't stress, but they're going to stress because that's just part of the process. And I do think there's colleges that will stay test optional. And yes, there are schools that are going to go back to the test for sure. But there's something else it's called test choice, or oh gosh, I'm forgetting what the terminology is. Something like test choice, in the sense that some colleges are saying you could submit an AP score, or you could submit like a subject test or something in the SAT, just something standardized. And I think that's clever. I think it gives more option. Though, and I've said this to students, I'm biased against tests, and that's because of my own experience of not doing well, and it being a soul crushing experience, feeling like your future was done and you weren't going to get anywhere. So I've been there. I've experienced it. So that definitely puts me in a bias, and I always want to be upfront about that. I think students that do very well on the tests, great. I'm envious of that, because I wasn't one of them. And I know there are a lot of other students who will not get the score that they are hoping that they want to get. And I know it can be soul crushing. And I also know that it's a 3 to 4 hour test of you in that moment. And it can be a score that you're super proud of and very, very high, and you love it, great. And it can be a score of like, how the heck did this happen? And colleges know that, and they also know that there's a, what's that mathematical correlation? That students that typically come from wealthier families tend to do better because there's more opportunity to pay for the thousands of dollars of test prep that can happen. My daughter will never have thousands of dollars of test prep. That we just can't afford it. So I think, as much as I want to tell students, well, this doesn't have to consume your life. You don't have to have this massive stress. It's still going to happen. That's just part of the whole process. And, I think colleges are doing such a great job of looking at the whole picture of the student, just not a GPA and a test score. If the college offers that opportunity, like if you want to go to a school and they have to have an ACT or SAT, and you don't like your score and you don't think it's a reflection of you, write about it, talk about it. Don't let them assume, because that's the power that you have in this, is to explain and make sure that they're not making assumptions.
One of the sort of things that you said that makes it three-dimensional is the essays. And one of the things I love the way you say it is it makes you three-dimensional in a two-dimensional application. What should students know? And you sort of touched on essays throughout this, but how should they approach writing their essays for college?
I think of it as just talk to me. Just talk to me. Have a conversation. Because when I've sat with students to talk about essays, it's cute, because sometimes they'll get out their Chromebook and they'll be like, well, here's what get out their essay. And I'm like, no, tell me what you think. What's the prompt? Well, the prompt is, why do you want to go here? And I'll say, okay, why? And, they're looking at, I'm like, no, just talk to me. Tell me why, and I think that is, in my opinion, one of the strongest ways to to do that approach of it. And I think that takes you out of the academic brain to the conversation piece. Because really what I view essays as is a conversational piece. They want to learn about you. So talk to them. You know, you could type it up and start typing, just talking to them, and then you can, revise it. But get that thought and that soul out there first.
How do colleges view gap years, and what should students consider if they're thinking about taking one?
So I think gap year, the word gap year has actually been misused because a gap year, from my understanding, actually started across the pond over in Europe, where students actually went to a gap year program that costs money for them to do something spectacular. There's actual gap year programs. And I think gap year is now become synonymous with taking a year off. And I feel like the word or the phrase taking a year off seems like a negative connotation for some people. And I think that's why gap year has come in, as it seems like something more positive. But they're actually very, very different. Just a little information about that. So using the word gap year, which is, if it means you're taking a year off, it's, and colleges know the difference. They know that. And so if you use the word gap year, it's like, well, what are you doing? Are you going to a program? Are you going somewhere? Like, what are you doing? Or are you taking a year off? I think it's important to be clear about that. And some schools will allow you to defer, and, you can apply, get your admissions, and there's the opportunity to say, okay, can I just put my acceptance on hold so I can come next semester or next fall to do that. Every college is different in terms of how they want to do that. And again, that's where it's very, very crucial to be on those colleges' websites to see what do they say about that.
What are some tips for managing stress during the application process?
Oh, tips. I think one of the biggest things I've seen is students feeling like they're behind. They're behind because they see their friends doing something, or they hear their friend requested their transcript or requested a letter, whatever it might be. It's not a competition from a time standpoint. So I think just literally just to stop and breathe and to know that whatever timeline you're on, you'll be okay. It will be okay. This November 1st frenzy that happens every year, there's a lot of students in this senior class that are applying regular decision to schools. And that is just fine, because what colleges will say, and I was on a webinar with one of the Ivy League schools where they said, apply when your application is ready, of course, by the deadline, right? But don't submit on November 1st just to submit it and your application's kind of crap, right? I also think starting early, in the sense of a lot of applications are going to be through the common application, and starting early just to create your account and put in your demographic information and your family information, and you can start plugging in all your courses and everything, just those components. I think, starting that in the summer as you come into senior year can just take a little bit of that pressure off. I think setting boundaries with your family, I think, is also super important, because one of the things I hear from students is that, my family is asking me, like, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with that? When is this? Da-da-da-da-da. And students will say, oh my gosh, can I just have some time and not have to, deal with this? So I think setting boundaries with your family to say, I know you care about me, I know you love me, and yes, let's talk about this, but let's set a boundary of when we talk. Like, we can talk every night from 7 to 7:20, whatever. I'll answer any question, but then after that, I need my space. I need my time. I need to be working on other things. I think that's super important. I think also making sure that you are in charge of this, that you are in charge of, the process of this, because I've seen over the years where I'll be meeting with a family and I'll purposely look at the student to say, tell me where you're at with things. And they will turn to their family member and wait for their family member to answer. And that just kind of tells me that somebody else is owning it. And so I'm really passionate about that part, is having some big ownership of it.
You've already touched on this before, but how important are grades in senior year for college admissions?
Very important. Every college application, every website will say that or every decision letter that you get, every positive decision letter will say it's contingent upon the successful completion of senior year. Schools are looking at your application based on courses that you're taking, that you plan to take, and your grade trajectory that you're on. If all of a sudden students are dropping core courses, science, math, get dropped in second semester, grades take a tumble, colleges will look at that, and I have seen where admissions have been rescinded, taken away, or scholarship opportunities have had to be taken because they were no longer meeting those qualifications. So senior year very much matters to the colleges, because they want to make sure that you are keeping up your progress, essentially training still for that marathon of college, that you're keeping up with that. Understanding that, yes, it's senior year. Sometimes there's a slide that happens, right? It happens. It's natural. But how do you keep progressing with that?
Second to last question.
Yes.
Talking for me personally, one of the things, because I'm not a 4.0 kid, I'll happily admit it, but one of the things that I've been told that's really uplifted my experiences is, I had rough freshman year, good sophomore year, great junior year, and a lot of colleges actually like to see that growth.
Absolutely.
Compared to a kid comes in all A's, and that's great. But what's that sort of conflict there that a lot of kids feel like, got a C freshman year the way I did, thought that ruined the whole thing. And then you go into sophomore year, you get decent grades. Oh, it doesn't matter, I got a C freshman year. Going to junior year, all A's, 1B. Oh, I got a C freshman year. What's that mindset come from, and what can kids really take from
Yeah, absolutely. Not that this is always a tricky one for me to answer, because I want to make sure I say it correctly. When students have kind of had that close to or ultimate perfection throughout high school, that's an amazing accomplishment, without a doubt, an amazing accomplishment. What I always worry about is what happens when they hit that obstacle. What will happen? How will they lift themselves up and get through that? My college roommate was valedictorian, and I'll never forget this. She got her first B in college, and she was devastated. She didn't know how to handle that. And for me, I'm like, B? I had B's. Great. But she just didn't know how to handle it, and she almost dropped out because she didn't know how to get herself through that. And so not that I'm advocating for that, so that's why I'm trying to be careful with my words, but I also think there's resilience and grit that gets built from that, and knowing how to persevere, and knowing how to say, this isn't going to define me. This isn't going to tear me down. This isn't going to be a deal breaker. I'm going to keep moving forward and moving up and moving that trajectory, because as we know, life is going to bring you obstacles. It's going to bring you obstacles. And how have you prepared to get through that? And not saying that a 4.0 student hasn't had obstacles. Not saying that. It's just different. It's just different challenges that you face. And if one of them has been a grade, I think there's such strength in showing, okay, look at me now. And because I always say to students, when you hit that obstacle in college, and everybody does, how will you keep pushing through?
We've hit our last question. What should students know or understand about the holistic admissions process?
Yeah, so I think, there's been a huge change, especially even after COVID with the holistic review. And I sit on the U of M advisory board. They do a holistic review. Now, some will say, well, gosh, but decisions come out so quickly for some and not for others, and everything. And it's like, true. But I think why there's the holistic review is particularly after COVID, and I know it was happening even before that, but even more so, colleges want to make sure that they're getting not just amazing students, but amazing people. And that's where that holistic piece comes in. Because yes, colleges want to admit you, but one thing they have to answer to is, can they graduate you? Do you have the grit and the resilience and the determination and the character to stay and do what's being asked of you there? So, I've heard this one saying where I don't remember where it's from, but it's like, sure, you can get admitted, but can you stay and do what it takes? And that's the holistic piece that I think comes in with that.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This means a lot to probably the sophomores and juniors that ask these questions.
I hope so.
So, is there any final words you'd like to share? I know that you sort of run around senior year and end of junior year, just sort of saying the same thing over and over again to sort of get a message into kids' heads. Is there anything you'd like to do similar here?
I think whatever the pathway that a student's on is their pathway. I think there's a lot of there's still pressure in this building where it's like 4-year college, you got to go to a 4-year college, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no, there's so many options out there for so many different reasons. And, even way before COVID, I remember I had a very high GPA student go to Normandale. And I remember they were getting questioned. What do you mean you're going to Normandale? That was her fit. She wanted to start there. She wanted to start her journey there. And so I think there's, I know there's a lot of pressure here in this building, 4-year college. And it's like, no, there's so many different other options. And, one is not inferior or superior to the other. And even when it comes to 4-year college names, I tell students, if you want to be, a veterinarian and you get into the #1 veterinarian school with all the bells and whistles and money, and it's in, Kentucky, town of 100. Is that where you want to spend your time? Maybe it is. Great if it is, but if it's not, it doesn't matter that it's a #1 school. It's got to be your fit, going back to that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Please take a donut.
I will.
And this was College Cravings. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.